Commander Zyrith had lived for 400 years. He had fought in 37 major battles. He had watched entire species rise to power and fall to dust. Nothing in the galaxy surprised him anymore, or so he believed. The war between the Dominion Alliance and the Veth Collective had lasted 60 years. Zyrith remembered the early days, when both sides thought victory would come quickly. Now, millions were dead, and neither side could claim an advantage. The galaxy had grown tired of the killing. But the killing continued anyway. Zyrith stood on the observation deck of the command station and watched the stars burn in the distance. His gray skin reflected the dim light, and his 4 eyes moved independently as they scanned the tactical displays around him. He was Corvani, one of the oldest species in the Alliance. His people were known for their patience and their long memories. They remembered everything, which was both a gift and a curse. The doors behind him opened, and Admiral Vectis walked in. The Admiral was Threnian, tall and covered in blue scales that shifted color with his mood. Right now, they were pale, which meant he was amused. "You have heard the news?" Vectis asked. "About the new species joining the war?" Zyrith did not turn from the window. "Yes, I have read the reports. Humans, they call themselves. From a small planet called Earth." "I know," Vectis laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Look at them, Zyrith. Look at what the Council sends us." He waved his hand, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a creature standing upright on 2 legs. It had soft skin, no armor, no claws, no scales. Its eyes faced forward like a predator. But its body looked weak, fragile. "They live for less than 100 years, Vectis continued. "They have no natural weapons. Their ships are primitive. Their homeworld has not even colonized its own star system properly. And the Council thinks they can help us win this war?" Zyrith said nothing. He studied the image carefully. The human in the picture was male, wearing some kind of military uniform. His expression was calm, almost peaceful. But there was something in his eyes that Zyrith could not identify, something that made his old heart beat just a little faster. "They have requested deployment to the Cathara front," Vectis said. Now Zyrith turned. "The Cathara front? That is suicide." "I know. I told them as much. Do you know what their admiral said to me?" "What?" He smiled and said, "We know." Zyrith felt the first flicker of something he had not felt in decades. He was not sure what to call it yet. 3 days later, the human delegation arrived at the command station. Zyrith was ordered to greet them and assess their military capabilities. He expected to find fools or madmen. Instead, he found something else entirely. Admiral Jack Cole was a human male of perhaps 50 years. His hair was gray at the edges, and lines marked his face. By Corvani standards, he was practically a child, but he walked with the confidence of someone who had seen death many times and was no longer afraid of it. Beside him stood Captain Lisa Grant, a woman with sharp eyes and a face that revealed nothing. Behind them came a group of human officers, all of them standing straight and silent. "Commander Zyrith," Admiral Cole said. He extended his hand, and Zyrith remembered that humans did this as a greeting. He reached out with his own clawed hand and felt the human's grip. It was firm and warm. "Admiral Cole, welcome to the Cathara command station. Thank you for having us. I know your alliance did not ask for our help. The Council accepted your offer." Cole smiled. "The Council accepted our demand to fight. There is a difference." Zyrith studied the human. "You demanded to join a war that has killed millions? A war that has destroyed entire worlds? A war that has destroyed entire worlds." "We did." "Why?" Cole's smile faded. For a moment, Zyrith saw something dark pass behind his eyes. "Because we have been watching this war for 10 years, Commander. We have seen the Veth burn colonies and enslave entire populations. We have seen species cry for help while the Alliance retreats. And we decided that we could not watch anymore. You could have stayed safe on your planet. We could have. But that is not who we are." Zyrith did not know how to respond to this. In his experience, every species looked out for itself first. Self-preservation was the most basic instinct in the universe, and yet here stood this fragile creature, asking to die for strangers. The human fleet departed 2 days later. Xyrath stood on the observation deck and watched their ships move toward the distant stars. They were heading to the Cathara front, where the Veth had been winning for 3 years, where the greatest warriors of the Alliance had failed. Captain Lisa Grant had visited him before they left. She had asked about the enemy, about their tactics, about their weaknesses. Xyrath had told her everything he knew. Then he had asked her a question. "Are you afraid?" She had looked at him with those strange human eyes. "Terrified," she said. "But fear is not a reason to stay home. Fear is just a feeling. What we do with it is a choice." Xyrath watched until the human ships disappeared from his sensors. Then he stood alone in the darkness and tried to understand what he had just witnessed. He had met brave species before. He had met foolish species. He had met species that did not value their own lives. But he had never met a species that was afraid and still chose to fight anyway. He did not know it yet. But he had just witnessed the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. And deep in his old heart, he felt the first stirring of an emotion he had almost forgotten. It was fear. The Cathara front was a graveyard of ships. Broken hulls floated through the darkness. The remains of battles fought and lost over 3 long years. The Alliance had sent their best warriors to this sector. None of them had been able to hold it. Xyrath had been ordered to observe and report on human combat effectiveness. He suspected the Council wanted proof that humans were useless, so they could send them home and forget about them. He flew his small observation ship to the Cathara system and prepared to watch another species fail. The human carrier, Relentless, arrived on the 3rd day. It was an ugly ship by galactic standards. All sharp angles and heavy armor. No elegance, no grace. Just metal and guns and determination. Commander Ben Hayes led the ground forces. He was a large man with a scarred face and hands that looked like they had been broken many times. Lieutenant Amy Vance commanded the fighter squadrons. She was small and thin, but her voice over the communication channels was like steel. Xyrath monitored their movements as they took positions around the planet Cathara 7, a world that had changed hands 6 times in the past year. The Alliance held it now, but barely. The Veth were massing for another assault. The attack came on the 5th day. The Veth fleet emerged from behind the system's largest moon. Weapons firing. They had brought twice as many ships as expected. Xyrath watched the tactical display as 2 Alliance cruisers exploded in the first minute of battle. The fleet commander, a Threnian named Vorak, immediately gave the order to retreat and regroup. It was standard procedure. Every species knew that you did not fight a losing battle. You fell back, gathered your strength, and returned when the odds were better. The humans did not retreat. "Relentless, you are ordered to withdraw," Commander Vorak said over the fleet channel. Admiral Cole's voice came back calm and steady. "Negative. We are engaging. You will be destroyed." "Maybe. But we are not leaving those cruisers behind." Xyrath leaned forward in his seat. The 2 destroyed cruisers were still burning, but escape pods were launching from their hulls. Survivors. The Veth would capture them, interrogate them, and kill them. This was known. This was expected. No one risked ships to save escape pods in the middle of a battle. The humans did. Lieutenant Amy Vance led her fighter squadron directly into the heart of the Veth formation. Xyrath watched in disbelief as her pilots flew through a wall of enemy fire to reach the escape pods. Ships exploded around her, but she did not stop. She did not hesitate. On the ground, things were worse. The Veth had landed troops on Cathara 7, and they outnumbered the defenders 3 to 1. Commander Ben Hayes took his soldiers to the front line and told them to hold. "For how long?" one of them asked. "Until I tell you to stop," Hayes replied. They held for 18 hours. Xyrath monitored their communications as the battle raged. He heard soldiers screaming, crying, dying. He heard sergeants shouting orders over the sounds of explosions. And through it all, he heard something he did not expect. Laughter. The humans were laughing. Not because they were winning. They were losing badly. But they were laughing anyway. Making jokes about death, about pain, about the absurdity of their situation. One soldier said he hoped the Veth would at least give him a nice funeral. Another said he wanted his ashes scattered on a beach somewhere warm. Sergeant Dan Perry took a direct hit to his arm during the 12th hour. The bone was shattered, and the medics wanted to evacuate him. He refused. He sat in the mud with his broken arm hanging useless at his side and continued to direct fire with his good hand. "I can still see," he said. "I can still talk. I am not done yet." The Veth pushed hard, but they could not break through. Hour after hour, the humans held their ground. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They simply refused to accept that they had lost. In space, the battle turned. Lieutenant Vance had saved the escape pods, and now she led her surviving fighters in a counterattack. The Veth were not prepared for enemies who flew toward them instead of away. They were not prepared for pilots who rammed their damaged ships into enemy bridges rather than eject to safety. By the 20th hour, the Veth began to pull back. By the 25th hour, they were in full retreat. For the first time in 2 years, the Kethera front had been successfully defended. Zyrith sat in his ship and stared at the reports. Human casualties were catastrophic. They had lost a quarter of their fighters and a third of their ground troops. Any other species would call this a defeat, but the humans were celebrating. He opened a channel to the relentless. Admiral Cole appeared on his screen, tired but alive. "Commander Zyrith, I assume you were watching." "I was. I do not understand what I saw." Cole smiled. It was a strange smile, both sad and proud at the same time. "What did you see?" "Your people dying. In great numbers. For escape pods. For a piece of ground that has no strategic value. It makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense. We do not leave our people behind. Ever. And we do not give up ground, unless there is no other choice. You could have retreated. You could have saved your ships and your soldiers. Yes. But then the Veth would have won. And the next time, they would expect us to retreat again. Now they know something different. What do they know?" Cole leaned forward, and his eyes were hard. "They know that humans do not run. They know that every inch of ground will cost them blood. And they know that we will come for our people, no matter what it takes." Zyrith ended the call and sat in silence for a long time. Then he began writing his report to the council. He wrote about tactics and casualties and strategic outcomes. But at the end, he added a single note that he had never written in 400 years of service. "Recommend further observation. These creatures do not respond to combat the way living beings should." He sent the report and wondered what he had just witnessed. He did not know it yet, but he had seen the future. And the future was terrifying. 6 months had passed since the first battle at Kethera 7. The front had stabilized for the first time in years, and the council had taken notice. They wanted to know more about these strange creatures called humans. They ordered Zyrith to embed with their forces and learn everything he could. He had expected to hate it. Instead, he found himself fascinated. The humans had set up a base on a moon called Vera 3. It was cold and gray and lifeless. But they had made it home. They built shelters, planted flags, and painted murals on the walls. One mural showed a blue planet covered in oceans and clouds. Earth, they called it. Their home. Zyrith walked through the base and watched them work. They moved constantly. Always busy. Always doing something. When they were not fighting, they were training. When they were not training, they were laughing and talking and playing strange games with cards and balls. He did not understand them. He was not sure he ever would. Medic Claire Dunn found him one day sitting alone in the observation room. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. The soldiers loved her because she never gave up on anyone, no matter how bad their wounds. "You look lost, Commander," she said. I am trying to understand your species. She sat down beside him. That is a big task. We do not always understand ourselves. How do you do it? How do you fight the way you do? What do you mean? Zyreth turned to face her. I have studied your biology. You are not built for war. You are slow, weak, and fragile. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears. You feel pain more intensely than most species, and yet you fight like demons. Claire smiled. Have you heard of adrenaline? The chemical your bodies produce under stress? Yes. When we are in danger, our bodies flood with it. Our hearts beat faster, our muscles grow stronger, our minds become sharper. Pain becomes distant. Like a voice in another room. We call it the fight-or-flight response. But other species have similar responses. It does not explain what I have seen. Cried. You are right. The adrenaline is not the answer. The answer is simpler. She pointed to her head. It is here. In our minds. We can choose to ignore our fear. We can choose to keep fighting even when our bodies are screaming at us to stop. It is not easy. It hurts. But we can do it. Why? Claire was quiet for a moment. Because some things are more important than survival. Zyreth thought about this for a long time. 3 weeks later, the Veth launched their largest offensive of the year. They wanted to take back Cathara 7 and push the Alliance out of the sector entirely. Intelligence said they were bringing everything they had. Admiral Cole called a meeting of all senior officers. Zyreth was invited to attend. They are coming with a fleet twice our size, Cole said. Ground forces 3 times our number. By any reasonable calculation, we should retreat. The room was silent. But we are not going to retreat. We are going to hold this sector. We are going to make them pay for every ship, every soldier, every inch of ground. And when they finally break, we are going to push them back so far they will never threaten this sector again. Commander Ben Hayes stood up. My soldiers are ready. Lieutenant Amy Vance nodded. My pilots are ready. One by one, every officer in the room confirmed their readiness. No one argued. No one questioned. They simply accepted that they were going to fight an impossible battle and probably die. Zyreth found himself standing. My ship is at your disposal, he said. He did not know why he said it. The words came out before he could stop them. Cole smiled at him. Thank you, Commander. Welcome to the family. The battle began 2 days later. It was the worst fighting Zyreth had ever seen. The Veth came in waves, throwing ships and soldiers at the human lines without mercy. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. The ground shook with the impact of bombs and missiles. The screams of the dying filled every communication channel. In the middle of it all, Admiral Cole was hit. A piece of shrapnel tore through the bridge of the Relentless and struck him in the chest. He fell, blood spreading across his uniform. Zyreth expected chaos. When leaders fell, armies broke. This was the way of war. But the humans did not break. Captain Lisa Grant stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. All ships. This is Captain Grant. I have command. Continue the assault. Do not stop. Do not retreat. Fight. And they fought. Zyreth watched humans die by the dozens, by the hundreds. He watched pilots fly into enemy fire knowing they would not survive. He watched soldiers charge forward over the bodies of their friends. And through it all, he watched them become something more than individuals. They became a single force. A single will. A single purpose. The Veth pushed hard, but they could not break through. Hour after hour, the humans held. And then, slowly, impossibly, they began to push back. When the battle finally ended, the Veth fleet was shattered. Their ground forces were destroyed. The Cathara sector belonged to the Alliance, and everyone knew it was because of the humans. Zyreth walked through the aftermath and saw soldiers sitting in the mud, crying for their dead friends. He saw medics working on wounds that could not be healed. He saw Commander Ben Hayes carrying the body of a young soldier who had died in his arms, and he understood something that changed him forever. Humans did not fight because they were strong. They did not fight because they were brave. They fought because they loved each other. They fought because they could not bear to let each other down. That night, Xyrith sent a classified message to his superiors on the Corvani homeworld. It said only this: "I have made an error in my initial assessment. Humans are not fragile. They are something else entirely. I recommend we never make them our enemies." He did not know if anyone would listen. But he knew that he had finally found the word for what he felt when he looked at humans. It was terror. 1 year had passed since the humans joined the war. In that time, everything had changed. The Dominion Alliance had been losing for 60 years. Now they were winning. Sector after sector fell to the combined forces, and at the heart of every victory were the humans. They had become the spear of the Alliance, the tip of every assault, the last line of every defense. Xyrith no longer served as an observer. He commanded a joint Corvani human strike force, working directly alongside the creatures he had once dismissed as fragile. He had learned their names, their stories, their dreams. He had watched them laugh and cry and die. And somewhere along the way, he had come to love them. Commander Ben Hayes had become his closest friend. The big human with the scarred face had a gentle heart hidden beneath his rough exterior. He told Xyrith stories about Earth, about green forests and blue oceans, about children playing in fields of grass under a yellow sun. Lieutenant Amy Vance flew beside Xyrith in every battle. She was reckless and fearless and alive in a way that made his old heart ache. She reminded him of warriors he had known centuries ago, before the endless war had worn him down. Sergeant Kevin Park was the youngest of his human friends. He was quiet and serious, always watching, always thinking. But when the fighting started, he moved like a force of nature. He had saved Xyrith's life twice already. Now they stood together on the bridge of the Alliance flagship, looking at a tactical display that showed the Veth homeworld system. The final assault was about to begin. Admiral Cole stood at the center of the room. He had recovered from his wounds, though a new scar now crossed his chest. His eyes were tired, but his voice was strong. "This is it," he said. 60 years of war, and it ends here. The Veth have gathered everything they have left to defend their home. If we break them today, the war is over. Captain Lisa Grant pointed to the display. "Intelligence shows their fleet is larger than expected. They have been hiding ships in reserve. We will be outnumbered." "How badly?" Cole asked. 2-1, maybe worse." Silence fell over the room. Xyrith looked at the human faces around him. He expected to see fear, doubt, despair. Instead, he saw determination. "Then we will have to fight harder," Cole said. "All ships, prepare for assault." The battle began at dawn. Xyrith had seen many battles in his 400 years. He had never seen anything like this. The Veth fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. They threw everything they had at the Alliance fleet, sacrificing ships and soldiers without hesitation. The space around the Veth homeworld became a storm of fire and death. The Alliance lines began to crack. 3 species announced withdrawal within the first hour, claiming their losses were too heavy to continue. Their ships pulled back, leaving gaps in the formation. The humans did not withdraw. Admiral Cole's voice came over every channel, calm and steady. "We did not come this far to lose. Hold the line." Xyrith watched the tactical display as human ships moved to fill the gaps left by the retreating allies. They were spreading themselves too thin. They could not hold, but they tried anyway. On the surface of the Veth moon base, Commander Ben Hayes led his soldiers through a nightmare. The enemy was everywhere, pouring out of tunnels and bunkers like water through a broken dam. His troops were dying fast. Sergeant Kevin Park found Xyrith during the worst of it. The Corvani commander had been hit by an explosion and was lying in a crater, unable to move. The Veth were closing in. "Leave me," Xyrith said. "Save yourself." Kevin looked at him with those strange human eyes. "No." He lifted Xyrith onto his back and started running. Enemy fire tore through the air around them. Kevin was hit twice, once in the leg, and once in the shoulder. He kept running. They reached the evacuation point just as a transport was taking off. Kevin threw Xyrith aboard and collapsed on the floor beside him, blood pouring from his wounds. "Why?" Xyrith asked. "Why did you risk your life for me?" Kevin smiled through the pain. "Because you are one of us now. We do not leave our people behind." In space, the battle reached its climax. Lieutenant Amy Vance had been fighting for hours without rest. Her fighter was damaged, leaking fuel, barely holding together. But she was still flying. A Veth command ship was directing the defense, coordinating their forces from behind a wall of escorts. As long as it survived, the enemy would keep fighting. Amy made her choice. She flew her crippled fighter straight at the command ship, dodging fire, weaving through escorts, ignoring the warnings, screaming in her ears. She could have ejected. She could have saved herself. She did not. Her ship hit the command ship's bridge at full speed. The explosion was visible from orbit. Xyrith watched from the transport as the Veth formation began to crumble. Without their command ship, they lost coordination. Their attacks became scattered and confused. The Alliance pressed forward. By nightfall, the Veth lines had broken completely. Their fleet was shattered. Their ground forces were surrendering. The war was over. Xyrith stood among the human survivors as they gathered to mourn their dead. Commander Ben Hayes was crying openly, holding the tags of soldiers who would never go home. Admiral Cole stood with his head bowed, lips moving in a prayer that Xyrith did not understand. And in that moment, Xyrith finally understood what made humans so terrifying. It was not their strength. It was not their technology. It was not even their refusal to surrender. It was their love. They loved each other so fiercely, so completely, that they would do anything to protect that love. They would fight impossible battles. They would sacrifice themselves without hesitation. They would tear the galaxy apart to save the people they cared about. Xyrith looked at the stars and felt a chill run through his ancient bones. He had lived for 400 years. And he had never known true terror until this moment, because he realized that humans were not just dangerous when they were fighting for survival. They were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The war ended on a Tuesday. After 60 years of death and destruction, the Veth Collective signed the surrender documents on the steps of their own Capitol building. The galaxy watched as their leaders bowed their heads and accepted defeat. 1,000 worlds celebrated. Billions of beings wept with relief, but Xyrith did not celebrate. He stood in his quarters on the Alliance station and stared at the ceiling and thought about everything he had seen. 1 month later, he received an invitation. The humans were holding a memorial ceremony on Earth, honoring all those who had died in the war. They wanted him to attend. He almost refused. He was not human. He had no place at their ceremony. But then he thought about Kevin Park, still recovering from his wounds in a hospital somewhere. He thought about Ben Hayes, who had lost so many friends. He thought about Amy Vance, who had given everything. He went to Earth. The journey took 3 weeks. When his ship finally entered the system, he pressed his face against the window and looked at the human homeworld for the first time. It was small. So small. A tiny blue marble floating in the darkness of space. Clouds covered parts of it like white paint on a canvas. Green and brown patches showed through where the land was. Oceans sparkled in the light of the yellow sun. This was the world that had produced the most terrifying warriors Xyrith had ever known. This little ball of rock and water. It did not seem possible. He landed near a city called Washington. Humans were everywhere, walking and talking and laughing and crying. They looked so ordinary, so normal. Hard to believe they were the same species that had fought like demons among the stars. The ceremony was held in a large open space surrounded by white stone buildings. Thousands of humans had gathered, along with representatives from dozens of allied species. At the center of the space stood a new monument, a tall pillar of black stone covered with names. So many names, Admiral Jack Cole found him in the crowd. The old human had retired after the war. His hair was completely gray now, and he walked with a slight limp from wounds that had never fully healed. But his eyes were the same, calm, steady, knowing. Commander Zyrith, I am glad you came. I almost did not. I am not sure I belong here. You belong here more than most. You fought beside us. You bled with us. That makes you family. Zyrith did not know what to say. Humans said things like this so easily, as if the words were simple. But he knew they were not simple at all. The ceremony began. Speakers talked about sacrifice and courage and the cost of freedom. Humans cried openly, holding each other, sharing their grief. Without shame, Zyrith watched them and felt something twist in his chest. Afterward, he walked to the monument and found the name he was looking for. Amy Vance. Her name was carved into the black stone, along with thousands of others. She had been 29 years old. In Corvani terms, she had barely started living. She talked about you, you know. Zyrith turned and saw a young human woman standing beside him. She had Amy's eyes. I am her sister, the woman said. She sent me messages during the war. She said there was a Corvani commander who did not understand humans but was trying to learn. She said she liked you. I liked her too. She was brave. She was terrified. Every battle, she was terrified, but she went anyway. The woman touched the name on the stone. That is what we do. We feel the fear, and we go anyway. Zyrith found Admiral Cole sitting alone on a bench near the edge of the gathering. The old man was staring at the sky, watching birds fly overhead. May I ask you something? Zyrith said. Of course. How do you do it? How do you send your people to die, knowing they will go willingly? Cole was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Because they believe some things are worth dying for, and we trust each other to make that sacrifice mean something. Every soldier who died in this war died protecting something they loved. Their friends, their families, their home. They knew the cost, and they paid it anyway. Does that make it easier? No, it makes it harder, because I loved them too. Zyrith looked at the humans gathered around the monument. Children were running through the crowd, laughing, playing games. They did not understand what this place meant. They did not know about the blood and the fire and the death that had bought their freedom to play. But their parents knew. Their grandparents knew. And one day, they would know too. He returned to the Galactic Council 3 weeks later. They wanted his final report on humanity. They wanted to know what the Alliance should do with these strange creatures now that the war was over. Zyrith stood before the gathered representatives of 100 species and took a deep breath. I have spent 2 years living among humans, he said. I have fought beside them. I have watched them die. And I have learned something that I believe this council needs to understand. He paused, looking at the faces around him. Some were curious. Some were dismissive. Some were afraid. Humans are not a species to be feared or controlled. They are not weapons to be pointed at our enemies. They are something far more rare and precious. What are they? Someone asked. They are people who love, deeply, fiercely, without limit. And that love makes them capable of things that no other species can match. They will fight for strangers. They will die for friends. They will sacrifice everything for an idea they believe in. He thought about Amy Vance flying her broken ship into the heart of the enemy. He thought about Kevin Park carrying him through fire. He thought about Jack Cole sending his people into battle and then crying for them when they did not come back. I have seen many warriors in my 400 years of service, but I had never known true terror until I watched humans fight for those they love. The council chamber was silent. My recommendation is simple. Be grateful for humanity. Welcome them as allies. Treat them with respect and kindness, and whatever you do, whatever happens in the centuries to come, never make them your enemies. He looked out at the stars beyond the chamber windows. Pray you never have to face them when they have nothing left to lose. The council approved his report without debate, and in the years that followed, humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as friends and protectors. Zyrith returned to Earth once more before he died. He visited Amy Vance's grave and placed a Corvani flower beside the stone. Then he sat in the grass and watched the sun set over the little blue world that had changed the galaxy forever. He thought about fear and love, and how they were not so different after all. And he smiled.